You're listening to Witch Wednesdays, a semi-weekly podcast source for all things witchcraft in the modern world. Join your host, Steph, on Wednesday mornings to chat about seasons, Sabbats, and all new witchcraft topics to help you make your life more magical. Welcome back to Witch Wednesdays. I'm Steph, and I have a guest here with me today to chat about a very beautiful book, if we are judging by the cover, which I do hear sometimes. So I am going to turn it over so that she can introduce herself and let you know where you can find her online.
Hello, I'm Varla Ventura. I'm the author of Enchanted Plants, a treasury of botanical folklore and magic. And you can find me at varlaventura.net and social media. I'm just on there as Varla Ventura. Most active on Instagram, I guess.
I am excited to chat today. And like I said, I try to, not always judge a book by the cover because there are some very boring books from like the 90s that have really great information, but you had me at gold gilded edges. I have to say, as soon as I put my hands on it, I was like, yes, this is everything I want in a book. Thankfully, your information inside matches the aesthetics
Oh,
of the outside.
good. I'm glad it measures up. Yeah.
Yeah, you get the good information as well. But wow, what a stunning book to even look at.
Yeah, I'm still kind of just amazed. I mean, it's heavy. It's like almost two
It is.
pounds, hardcover, gorgeous design. And now I saw the design, in the part of the process. As a writer, you're kind of, you get to see the design pages. You go through the manuscripts and then you see the design pages. And so I saw most of the art. There were a few pieces of art that were added a little later. But I couldn't believe I had envisioned this as a book that had each plant had its own illustration, but that can be kind of a big ask. And I was just sort of trusting that the publisher would get the vision, and they did, and then some. And then I found out about the gilded edges late in the process. It had actually already, I think it had gone to press, and the art director called me and was like, "So we got you gilded edges." And I was like,
Mm.
"What? What? Really?" But all of that aside, you see it, you have an idea of it, maybe more than like the average person who hasn't seen the interior. But when it actually comes, yeah, it just exceeded my imagination for what this book could look like.
Yeah, it is just absolutely stunning. And yeah, it's got beautiful thick pages, the illustrations for each plant. I just so happy to have this on my shelf, like to use, but also to look at.
I love that you said that because I actually feel the same. And I don't say that like, oh, my book's like the best book, but like this is a book that I would buy even if I had all the other plant books in the world. Like I'm a plant person and I'm especially plant magic and plant lore. So I'll buy all the books. And I'm just really honored that I feel like this one holds its own and is, got this kind of collector element to it. Because plant people and they like all the plant books. We like all the plant books, so there's always room on the shelf for one more.
Which is a great segue into let's talk about what can readers expect and what sets it apart other than the beautiful looks, what sets it
Yeah.
apart from other plant books that, the green witches out there are all collecting.
Yeah, other than its looks. So this book is I think a little different. Again, as a plant person, as a plant lore person, plant magic person, like I said, I'll buy all the books. I have all the books. I love all the books, and I love all the perspectives because I think especially when you're tackling subjects like folklore and magic, individual interpretations of those things can be everything, and one person's take on a plant can be very enlightening. So I feel like it's one of those fields, I guess, for lack of a better term, but it's one of those fields that there's just room for everyone at the table, and I really like that. I feel like, especially with plants, There's just this like bonding element that happens when you meet other plant people. But regardless, as a plant person and as a consumer of these books and topics, and since I was, a teenager, really, I I kind of wanted to do something that I thought was a little bit of a different approach. And the idea came to me one day when I was reading like a grim fairy tale. And I was just like, hey, this is interesting. This particular plant really is prominent in this story. It was probably a rose or something, because roses always come up. And I just got this idea of what about exploring fairy tales um, and folklore, but through a botanical lens. So rather than making a book that's about plants and their lore, which this is, it's sort of more of a book about stories where plants are central to the equation. So I set about kind of organizing the book. There's lore in every plant, right? So you can find a story behind every plant name. Uh, so naturally, there were hundreds of plants that I wanted to include, but I started sharpening the focus on ones that there was a substantial lexicon where the book or where the plant itself, the story would change if the plant weren't in it or if the plant changed. And so, with that lens, I was able to start sort of cultivating exactly what plants I wanted to have in the book. And then I organized it. Each chapter is alphabetical, of course, by like most common plant name. But I organized it by the types of gardens that you might encounter in a fairy tale. So, for example, the first chapter is the Queen's Garden, and that's where you'll find like what would have been considered exotic cultivars. And then we have another chapter on the Witch's Garden, another chapter about like plants that you would gather from the meadow. And so you kind of go on this journey. You can read it plant at a time, or you can read it out of order, but I tried to create a little bit of a narrative so that you kind of leave the castle walls and you go to the kitchen garden and then the witch's garden and then the meadows and then the woods and eventually you hit the sea or the lakeside. So I tried to like really keep that like that fairy tale and folklore overarching idea, but always focusing on stories that um, the plants really are the main character in some ways.
And I love how you have that set up. I know you say like go from plant to plant, but I really love reading it in order. Because that's how I tend to, if I get like a new book in my hands, I go through it like from start to finish, and then I go back and like tab it and like pull out all the things that I specifically want to go back to. But I loved reading it, from beginning to end because you start each chapter as like it's like going on a journey. And getting all of the little like folklore pieces in there was just so fun to read. It read almost like a meditation, like going from
Oh,
garden to garden.
I thank you. That means a lot to me because that means that at least one person got what I was going. I mean, that was my hope that you would have that kind of experience of um like like a traveler in the world of botanical folklore a little bit. So I'm happy that that came across.
It's it, absolutely. I'm a sucker for the folklore, so I love the stories, like the last chapter or the about the Marsh King's daughter. I love the way that starts. It was like there was once a wretched little girl who had to live.
Yes,
I'm like, this
yes.
is so great. That's
Anger,
like the first line.
anger.
I'm hooked. I'm in.
Yeah.
It was just
Oh
so
my
great
gosh.
reading through those.
Some of those stories were stories that I just remember from reading when I was, 8, 9, 10 years old that haunted me. And that was one in particular, the girl who trod on the loaf, because what a horrifying thing to do to step on this fresh loaf of bread. You're supposed to be bringing your hungry grandparents so that your little shoes don't get dirty. And then she sinks down into the Marsh King's lair as a result of her punishment. And I was always like, wow, I can't imagine. Probably that's the age of the little girl. I was probably that age when I read it. So it kind of rings extra true. It's like, oh, don't step on bread. Don't be wasteful.
Yeah, that one was like, I'm hooked. But yeah, I love all of the folklore and the history that comes along with it. I think there's such a deep understanding that you get from reading this because a lot of the like plant books or just witchcraft books that touch on plants will say that it has this property and this association and you can use it in spells like related to this. And I love that you pulled out exactly why. Like
Mm.
the juniper was a big one. It's like, oh, magical properties, wards off sickness and has a connection with the dead. And then literally the next page you go into, well, here's why in history, here's what juniper was used for. So that's why we still have this, connection to the dead goes all the way back, to ancient Greeks and things like that. I was like, this is so interesting. This is so fun.
Oh, it was a lot of fun for me to also kind of the magical properties that I took like it was actually the publisher asked me for that. They said, "Can you also include magical properties?" And I was like, "Yeah, done." It's like but it was fun for me to do that because I was able to kind of like really think outside of the known a little bit. It's like, of course, roses are associated with love. There's some of those things like that we know. But also just knowing what I knew about the lore to kind of incorporate that and like the type of magic you might want to use the plants in. Um, yeah, so that was a lot of fun to kind of add that in as I was going through.
Yeah, I think it adds such a great, like, deeper level of understanding and being able to then like connect with the plant and be able to use it and understand exactly why things are working the way they are. I think it just makes everything work a little better when you have that understanding.
I think that with plants especially, they have their like own special language and it comes across in this kind of like an unseen way. And like I said, I do believe that every plant has its story. I mean, sometimes it's just a really interesting backstory about why it was named after this particular Greek god. But as a person growing up, like working in plant nurseries and in horticulture, those kind of things really helped me memorize a lot of the plants and the plants' properties and whether they like sun and just by kind of like learning a little bit of that backstory or just translating what the Latin name means. Always kind of helped me to memorize the plant names and properties. So honestly, like in many ways, this book I've been writing for 20 years. I got the idea of like this particular like lens on it about 5 years ago, but I have been studying plants and I found like when I was turning the manuscript in, I found I was going through some old papers and I found like a paper I'd written 20 years ago on the ethnobotanical properties of this native California sticky bush or something. And I was like, oh, huh, this is kind of interesting. This is basically the same vibe 20 years later.
I love that. So I know that this is not your only book. So what came first for you, as a kid, as a teenager? Was it plants or was it fairy tales and folklore?
Oh, I would guess that those things were simultaneous. I would say like some of my earliest memories are plant related. I have a lot of visceral plant memories from, being even like a toddler. Um, but also I was inundated with fairy tales from a young age as well. And not just the Disney types, but like, we were reading like the Little Mermaid. That's a haunting one.
That one's horrifying.
It's horrifying. It's horrifying. And of course, I'm a child of the 70s, so I grew up with the Hans Christian Andersen horrifying version, and then, the Disney version came, when was that? Like the late 80s, early 90s, I guess. And it was like, well, that was it's
Yes,
still got some
89.
cruel elements, but yeah, I think mid 80s, maybe. Yeah, but it's like, oh, that's got some cruel elements, but where's the part where she's walking and every step is like daggers on her feet? Where's that part?
Yeah,
Gosh, so what came first? I think those two things were really just heavy influences in my life. If I had to pick between those two, I would say plants because I think those were my pathway into everything. And I think the older I get, the more I realize that that's not everyone's pathway. Sometimes you're just like, oh, you can't hear plants? Okay. I'm sure much like people with other psychic abilities are like, oh, you can't talk to spirits all the time, it's just like, oh, I can't, of course, like everyone has their own thing, but it's just something I've sort of realized in more recent years, not just that I'm a plant person or obsessed with plants, because I am those things, but that I have an ability to communicate with them in a way that I can't really explain.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Like people, if I go somewhere, they'll say, "Well, how much do I water your plants?" And I'm like, you just give them water when they tell you. Like I don't have a schedule. I don't have a repotting schedule. I don't have a fertilizer. I just like into it when to do it. And then some things don't. It's not like I'm the greatest green thumb. Some things don't always make it. I have a couple of plants that I constantly have issues with, and I've tried to grow them multiple times, and we just don't get along. And that's it. But I just don't really like, I don't chart them. I just sort of, I don't know. I guess I really can kind of hear them, but it's not the kind of voice that you hear like, hey, feed me or water me. It's just sort of a like, uh-huh, yeah, I hear you. And sometimes I ignore it because I'm like really busy and I'm like, I know, guys, but I'll fill the humidifier later. I've got to get out the door.
That's so interesting. On the one hand, I like kind of wish that I had that, but on the other, mine are probably like screaming at me. So maybe it's better.
Oh, it's very easy to block out. But they show you when you've neglected them for sure. But
Oh yes, they do. I mean, I have a snake plant that I have like kept alive. He was my 2020 pandemic baby, and he's great because snake
oh
plants
yeah,
are so incredibly easy to take care
snake
of.
plants thrive on neglect.
I'm glad,
That is
yes.
one of my favorite plants, honestly. They are, and there's actually like a bunch of different varieties too, and they're all just like so easy and gorgeous. And
He's so
the worst thing you can do is like put them in too soft of soil and water them too much.
I know. I'm like, oh, it's the first of the month. I should probably water you, huh?
Yeah,
That's
it's like sprinkle. No, they're very like very, very forgiving plants and very easy to like start. You can just pull off one of those little pups and just stick it in soil and you'll have a second plant. They're really forgiving.
yeah, he's fantastic. I only have
Yeah.
another one that my cousin gave me uh maybe 2 years ago, but it's a little bit of a struggle to I don't even know what it is. I really should take a picture and
Yeah, send me a
Instagram.
picture.
Yeah, I'll send you a picture of it. And I
Yeah.
don't even know what it is. Didn't come with a little like tag or anything, so I have no idea. So that's probably why I don't know how to take care of it. But I imagine that one is screaming at me. Like, you are doing everything wrong.
Like everything you do. Well, the best thing I've done for my indoor plants is to just have a big, big humidifier because most indoor house plants are, tropical in nature. They come from, either Southeast Asia or Central or South America or Mexico. Like that's where they're native to. And so you have these plants that are used to a really like um, bright and steamy environment, not necessarily sunny, but like, good bright filtered light. And so I think the humidifier is more important than even a regular watering schedule. And I basically have created this environment in which my like office is full of plants. The humidifier is running so much that I've warped some of my books, so I have to keep my books in a different room. But I walk in, especially in the dead of winter, and it's like, I mean, it's the next best thing to living in a greenhouse, which is my ideal home. Like a Victorian greenhouse
Oh my God.
conservatory.
Oh, I could just picture it.
Throw a hammock up, or I don't know, maybe a beautiful loft bed or something.
I know a lot of green witches who are with you there.
Yes,
Perfectly.
yes. We can all go in on one. There's, nice big one. There's room for everyone and all their plants.
I would be the opposite. I will live in my little igloo with like a pine tree.
Oh,
Just
okay, okay. Yeah.
be in the freezing cold. I'll like that.
Oh, nice, nice. Well, we can vacation at one
There you
another's um imaginary witch cottages.
go. So for the listeners who are maybe more like me and thinking that they're not particularly good with plants, would they still get a lot out of this book? Is it acceptable for beginners?
Oh, absolutely. Okay, so basically, and this isn't full of like advice on how to take care of plants either. Any of the plants that are in this book are known plants. And so you can, as far as witchcraft or magic goes, you can get the dried version of these. You can get an image of these and use them in your magic. Like it doesn't have to be you have to grow these plants from seed and cultivate them yourself. And there's lots of reputable plant witches out there that you can get essences from. And like I highly recommend poison plant witchery if you want to dabble into Kobe Michael and his wonderful um, poison plant apothecary. He is like a poison plant master. So if you want to work with the magic of the plants, but you don't want to grow the plants themselves, you certainly you buy it in bulk at the grocery store or whatever. But I will say that this book is also designed for people who are interested in like storytelling and fairy tales, and so you also sort of learn some things like the second chapter is the cottage garden of earthly delights. And that's actually mostly edible. I mean, it is all edible plants. We've got turnips, beans, garlic, corn, cabbages, surprising number of stories about cabbages, pumpkins. So there's some very familiar plants that you have in. It might be just sort of interesting for you to learn these funny little stories about how controversial the name of the turnip is, or how, pumpkins were introduced to Europe because they're indigenous to the Americas, or how corn contributed to the vampire craze. There's all kinds of fun stories in there. So each chapter is set up to give you a story. So I think like it's got a bit of that like collection of classic um fairy tales. And so what I've done is sometimes if the fairy tale was just perfect as is, I excerpted from that. Otherwise, I retold the fairy tales, which was a lot of fun to do as a writer. And it just gives you a bit of history, a bit of folklore. So I think it kind of branches out from it's not necessarily just for plant people or witches, it's for folklorists, it's for people who like to learn about kind of the history behind things. Especially, there's a lot of common plants in here: daffodils, tulips, pomegranate, apple. You'll never look at an apple the same way after after reading this. So
Yeah.
it's not a book of obscure plants, is what I mean. Like probably the most obscure are a couple of the plants that are in the witches chapter, but those actually aren't that obscure. You might just not realize that those are as poisonous or have as much history to them. You may just rethink them, but all the other plants are very, very common. They're everyday plants that are, there's this hidden magic in them, and that was kind of the joy of writing it, was teasing out that magic.
Yeah, I think a lot of people who listen to this podcast are going to feel a connection with this book because there's just something that so magical about the folklore and the fairy tales behind everything that just adds an extra layer of magic to everything. Makes me so happy.
Well, let me tell you, I put a lot of magic into this book, but so did the publisher. And there's a little bit of bibliomancy magic in this book that was unexpected to me. Every book has a ribbon bookmarker, and I just assumed that it was like a machine thing where it's just like drops it in and then it gets sent on down the assembly line or whatever. And so when I got my book, my ribbon was right dead in the center at Datura, and I was like, oh, that's a great place for the ribbon to be. Then when I got my box of authored copies, I was kind of flipping them open and I started noticing that the ribbon was actually in a different place. So quite a few of them have been in kind of the same area, but I gave one to a friend and it was all the way in the back at Water Lily. And then somebody sent me a picture the other day and their ribbon was at like Turnip or something. So I'm asking people when they get their copy to snap a photo and tag me on Instagram or something like that to show me or just let me know where their ribbon bookmarker fell because I feel like that is a little bit of like that plant has something in particular to tell you. That story has something in particular for you when you get your book. And honestly, like, how can you plan that? You can't plan bibliomancy.
Oh, that's so cool. I thought it was mine was on dandelion.
Oh, really? Okay,
The
that's
ribbon was
pretty up to
yellow, and I thought it
date.
just matched the yellow page of the dandelion. So I thought that's why they did that.
No, you're actually the first. I think you're the first dandelion.
I'm
Oh,
the
that's
first
wonderful. That's the most
cool.
underrated plant, really.
Oh, I freaking love dandelions. We have a landscaper in our area that always wants to kill all the dandelions on my lawn. I'm like, don't you dare. Don't
No,
you dare put any weed
no.
killer here. They are not weeds. I love them.
They are so powerful and they're packed with wishes too, right?
Exactly. They are
No, 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 no.
absolutely
I
one
get
of
a
my favorites.
hundred wishes out of that one plant.
Yes, exactly. I freaking love dandelions. So I'm
Oh,
always like,
that's great that you got dandelion. I love that. See, that's
oh,
fabulous. So yeah,
that's
when
so
people get it, if they just want to drop a note or it's really fun and it's just this fun, unexpected thing. And I'm a big bibliomancy person. It's I love doing it and I do a lot of writing classes with teenagers and I've taught them all the art of bibliomancy, which of course, if anybody out there is listening doesn't know, it's basically where you kind of ask a question of the book and then you flip through it and much like you might pull a tarot card, you stop and point at something and that's sort of like your answer, the message in the book. So I just love that this book itself is the book is enchanted. Isn't that wild? I can't
so
believe it.
yeah, and bibliomancy is so great because you can do it with absolutely any book. It doesn't have to be like a witchcraft book. It doesn't have to be the Bible. It can be absolutely
Right.
anything.
Oh, I've never done it with the Bible. I'm
I don't know if
afraid
I
to do
would do
that. Yeah.
it. But I do know that I don't think that people who do that with the Bible call it bibliomancy. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah,
that
probably
they
not.
just like open and see like what parable it like falls on and
Yes.
like that's
Yes.
there.
Yeah. Well,
There
and then this one too, you might get a picture, which is great because then you can just meditate on the picture, you know?
yeah. And it's so interesting. I had no idea that the bookmark would be on different pages. I just assumed because the yellow
Yeah.
bookmark matched the yellow dandelion, and that's why they did that. That was my first.
And I just assumed it was like, oh, that's the center of the book. That's where the bookmark will be. It just never even occurred to me until the next batch came in and I started noticing. I think I opened one up to sign and send to my mom, and I was like, oh, wait, her ribbon's somewhere else. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And yeah, it's just
Fun.
exactly encompasses the point of the book, which makes it its own. You know, it's when you collaborate like that, I think there was just a lot of love and magic and consideration that went into the design. So shout out to the team at New Page and Redwell Weiser for all of their just there's so many little thoughtful things that as the person who wrote the manuscript, I saw what they did with the words and how that inspired the art and it just really I don't know. It just it became it's an entity in and of itself, and really seemed to have a lot of there's a lot of care and magic that went into this book. So um, yeah, I hope that people get a lot of self-care and magic when they have their own copies, and it's reasonably priced.
Which is always appreciated.
That's I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah,
It's
for a hardcover.
$20.
My goodness.
Yeah, $20 for a gilded edged hardcover with a ribbon bookmark. full of
Right on.
full color illustrations. Perfect
Yes,
Mother's Day gift,
absolutely.
right?
Oh yeah, it's such a yeah, absolutely beautiful gift. And perfect for heading into the season. Like obviously we work with plants all year long, but I think just being able to like see them out in nature right now and like see things growing, it just reminds you to connect.
It does, it does. I don't know where you're located, but I'm in the Minneapolis area. So
Chicago.
oh, Chicago. Okay, so you probably are seeing a few more flowers than I am, but I'm just seeing my tulips are just starting to grow up, like I don't, they're not even blooming yet. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, come on, guys, let's go. And it feels like a little bit of an early, I mean, it feels like an indulgently early spring in some ways, right? Because it's like, oh, we didn't get that third snow.
Yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
But
mean, I
things are
hope that it's
starting to
not coming.
bloom and the weather's starting to just sort of like, yeah, everything's starting to defrost and
Yeah, it was 80 degrees here yesterday, so
oh
it's
wow.
fingers crossed
Yeah.
we're out of the worst of it, but you never know.
Yeah, I know. I know. And you got the lake too, so
Yeah.
that's your wild card.
Yeah, who knows? But we are seeing like a lot of plants and it just reminds me that this is the time of year to, notice nature and get out there and be able to connect with it a little bit more.
Right. And so that's the thing. If you don't garden, you don't have your own garden, you can still like you can walk through the botanical gardens, you can do forest bathing, you can go to the conservatory and hopefully you'll remember a interesting little tidbit about one of the plants that you meet along the way.
Yeah, and I love that we've got a giant botanical garden here. It's not too far from me. It's about 40 minutes. So a beautiful place to go check out. In the meantime, I'll try to grow some things in my own yard
Oh
besides
yeah,
dandelions.
I'm gonna hit that botanical garden up for doing a talk there or something
Ooh,
because I love that botanical garden and I'm, driving-ish from Chicago.
yeah,
Drivable,
yeah,
right?
it
Kind of
is.
a haul, but it's not that, it's
No,
still drivable.
for sure. That's exciting. Well, before we wrap up, I would love to ask you if you have any last advice that you would like to give to beginners who are just going to be picking up your book for the first time and diving into plants and folklore and fairy tales.
Well, I think this book is actually would be a great entry into those things because um I think it's a very non-intimidating way to start approaching plants is to think about them as sort of characters in a story. So, and the other thing that I hope that as people start reading into, I hope they get inspiration from it, maybe to write their own stories. Storytelling and fairy tales, they have this. We talk sometimes about fairy time, right? We hear about this like kind of otherworldly time where fairies exist, and I think that that is really this place that you can visit when you're really entranced in a fairy tale or you're really, it's a bit of a meditation, as you said, like you can kind of get wrapped up in what you're doing in the garden. But I think just kind of embracing like the stories behind things can really help you connect with the plants so much. And it's so simple, you eat an apple while you're reading the book. What look at daffodils a little differently the next time you're walking through the garden. But I hope that I think it's a pretty non-intimidating book, but also packed with knowledge. But you just put the ribbon bookmarker in and use it for research. That's what I do with all my books anyway. I do what you do. I read from beginning to end, and then I get out my post-its and I just tab all the things I want to revisit.
I
Oh, and the other thing that I would recommend too is that check out my bibliography because I used a lot of books. As I said, I've been researching this book for years. And so there are a lot of very interesting books on both on fairy tales and folklore and on plants and interesting articles that I used as source material. So that it can be fun in that way too.
Yeah, I totally forgot. I usually call that out when there are really great bibliographies, and yours is pages and pages, and
Oh
it's
my
so
gosh.
good. So many
I
good
actually had
resources.
to turn
Totally
it in
forgot.
separate. I was past my deadline. I was on my deadline. I sent the manuscript in and I said, I need to send you my bibliography next week because it was so long. And the way I had kept track, some of them were repeats because every time I used anything, I would just enter it into the sheet. And then I alphabetized it and saw that I had repeats. And so I was just like, I need another like week to make sure that I haven't missed anything, to make sure I didn't leave anything out. And I was like, but just so you know,
Yeah,
it's
it's
like a
so good.
6,000 word bibliography. So it's going to take
So
some
good for more resources.
patience.
Well, Varla, thank you so much for being here today and chatting about your book. And I know that listeners are really going to love this one, not just on looks alone, but for the content too.
Well, thank you. I'm absolutely honored that you asked, and it was a delight.
Listeners, I'm going to have everything linked below and in the show notes over at witchwednesdays.com so you can easily find the book and find Varla online if you want to check out anything that we talked about today. Well, that's everything that I have for you this week. I will see you all next week. Need even more witchcraft in your life? Subscribe to Witch Wednesdays on Patreon and YouTube for all types of exclusive bonus content like spells, recipes, book reviews, and more, or even order personalized tarot readings and spells. Be sure to follow on Instagram at Witch Wednesdays Podcast. And you can find all these links and more at witchwednesdays.com.